The mare fell into a hole and was left to die. This is a story that will leave you speechless. What happens in the middle of it completely changes the ending. We'd love to know which city you're watching this video from. Leave it in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and activate the bell to stay updated on all our content. Jasmine was no ordinary horse. With a coat that shimmered like midnight under the sun and eyes that held the wisdom of countless sunsets, she roamed freely on the outskirts of Willow Creek, a quaint town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests in the heart of America. Her owners, the Harris family, trusted her implicitly. They allowed her the freedom to graze the lush meadows and drink from the clear, bubbling brook, confident that Jasmine knew the way home like the back of her hoof. Every morning, as the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jasmine would trot out of the barn, her mane flowing gracefully in the gentle breeze. Children from the nearby homes would often watch her from their windows, mesmerized by her graceful movements and the serene aura she exuded. To them, Jasmine was more than just a horse. She was a symbol of freedom and the untamed beauty of nature. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the leaves began to turn golden and the air carried a hint of impending change, Jasmine felt an unusual restlessness. The meadow seemed quieter than usual, the usual chorus of birdsong subdued. Driven by an inexplicable urge, she ventured further than she had ever gone before, her hooves softly crunching the fallen leaves beneath her. As she wandered through unfamiliar terrain, the landscape began to shift. The peaceful meadows gave way to a construction site, where heavy machinery hummed and workers moved busily, oblivious to the world around them. The clang of metal and the roar of engines filled the air, creating a cacophony that contrasted sharply with the tranquility Jasmine was accustomed to. In the midst of this bustling environment, a sleek black car sped recklessly down the makeshift road. The driver, a man with a hardened expression, seemed to take pleasure in the chaos he created. As the car careened around a sharp bend, Jasmine froze, her instincts sensing danger. The car screeched to a halt mere inches away, and two passengers, one tall and stern, the other petite and sharp-eyed, stepped out with malicious intent. Without warning, they began shouting and waving their arms, trying to scare Jasmine into fleeing. The horse, startled and frightened, bolted in the opposite direction, her powerful legs carrying her as fast as they could. In her haste, she failed to notice the unstable concrete beneath her hooves. The ground gave way suddenly, and Jasmine plunged into a deep, narrow ditch hidden beneath a thin layer of earth and debris. Pain shot through her limbs as she landed harshly at the bottom. The ditch was damp and enclosed, offering little hope of escape. Her cries for help were swallowed by the relentless noise of the construction site above, the workers too engrossed in their tasks to notice the tragedy unfolding beneath them. The scorching sun beat down mercilessly, intensifying her suffering as her wounds began to bleed, and her strength waned with each passing moment. Jasmine lay there, trapped and alone, her spirit battered but not broken. Little did she know that her plight was about to set into motion a chain of events that would change the lives of everyone connected to Willow Creek forever. Hours passed, though it felt like days. The sun beat down on Jasmine relentlessly, her coat matted with sweat and dirt. Her hooves ached, and her breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. Despite the pain, her spirit refused to be completely crushed. She kicked her legs weakly, trying to find a way out, but the walls of the ditch were steep and slick with mud. In the distance, the sound of a truck engine rumbled to a halt. A woman's voice, faint and almost lost amidst the noise of construction, called out, "Is anyone out there?" It was Amelia, the local vet, known for her caring heart and sharp instincts when it came to animals. She had heard about the incident involving the reckless car but had no idea of the full extent of the damage until she arrived. Amelia was a woman of few words, but her presence was one that carried a sense of calm and authority. She had been working in Willow Creek for years, and her bond with the animals in town was unspoken but deep. Seeing the frightened horse at the bottom of the ditch, Amelia's heart sank. Jasmine's condition was dire. Her breathing was labored, and the gash along her side was deep, oozing blood. But there was something in Jasmine's eyes, a spark that refused to fade. Amelia knelt down, speaking softly to the horse, trying to soothe her. "Don't worry, Jasmine. I'll get you out of here." Amelia quickly contacted the town's emergency services, and within moments, a team of workers arrived with ropes and harnesses. Together, they carefully lifted Jasmine from the depths of the ditch, and though it was a slow and painful process for the horse, she managed to stand. Her legs wobbled, but she was alive, barely. As they transported her back to the Harris farm, Amelia stayed by her side, constantly monitoring her condition. Jasmine's injuries were severe, and it was unclear if she would survive. Amelia's own heart ached as she watched the horse struggle. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the Harris family gathered around the barn, anxious and unsure. Jasmine was sedated, her breathing steady but shallow. The family, especially Mrs. Harris, had raised Jasmine since she was a foal. The bond they shared was something deep, built on years of trust and love. "I don't know if she'll make it," Amelia said quietly to Mr. Harris, her tone grave. "But if she does, it will be a long road to recovery. She needs peace, quiet, and time." Mrs. Harris wiped away a tear. "We'll give her whatever she needs," she whispered. The incident that had caused Jasmine's fall did not go unnoticed in Willow Creek. The story spread like wildfire, and soon, whispers filled the streets about the reckless young men in the black car. It didn't take long for the community to identify them as Thomas and Jared, two troublemakers from a well-off family who had recently moved into town. Though they were known for their arrogance, no one imagined they could be capable of such cruelty. Their actions were inexplicable to most, yet they seemed to find amusement in the chaos they caused. They never apologized or even acknowledged the pain they had inflicted on Jasmine. As the days passed, Jasmine's wounds began to heal, but her spirit remained fragile. She didn't trust easily anymore, even with the Harris family who had loved her for years. Amelia continued to visit her, checking her progress and ensuring she received the best care possible. One afternoon, while Jasmine was grazing in the meadow, she heard the distinct sound of a car approaching. Her heart raced, and she instinctively bolted toward the fence. To her surprise, it was not the black car of the men who had hurt her, but Thomas and Jared. They pulled up in their car, smirking as they approached the fence. "We were just checking on how your horse is doing," Thomas said with a mock-sincere smile. Jared laughed. "Wouldn't want her to sue us or anything, right?" Their words stung, but the real shock came when Jared suddenly reached through the fence and tried to grab Jasmine's mane. In a split second, she reared up, kicking her powerful hooves at him. Jared staggered back, narrowly avoiding a painful strike. Thomas's smirk faded as he saw the raw fury in Jasmine's eyes. "You're not welcome here," Mr. Harris shouted from the porch, rushing toward the fence. "Get off my property and never come near my horse again." Jared and Thomas exchanged a brief, confused look before retreating. As they sped away in their car, the Harris family stood in silence, shaken by the encounter. Amelia stood by Jasmine's side in the Harris family's barn, carefully examining the horse's condition. Jasmine had come a long way since the fall, but there was something in her behavior that didn't sit right with the experienced vet. The wounds on her body were healing, and her once swollen leg had regained much of its strength. But her eyes, those large, expressive eyes, held a strange, distant look. It wasn't the look of a horse recovering from physical trauma. It was the look of a horse haunted by something far deeper. The more Amelia observed, the more convinced she became that the fall had been only part of the story. Jasmine wasn't just traumatized by the pain of the fall or the struggle to escape the ditch. Something else had changed in her. A shift in her spirit, something intangible but palpable, like a shadow hanging over her once peaceful nature. She tried to attribute it to the stress of the event, perhaps the way the accident had caused a temporary rupture in Jasmine's confidence. But deep down, Amelia knew this was something more. Jasmine had been spooked, frightened not just by the fall, but by something much more insidious. It was then that Amelia started to connect the dots. She knew about the reckless behavior of Thomas and Jared, the men who had frightened Jasmine that fateful day. They had been seen driving recklessly around the area before, but their involvement in the incident had never seemed deliberate. Still, Amelia's instincts told her that there was more to their actions than simple carelessness. One afternoon, after tending to Jasmine, Amelia went to the local diner for a cup of coffee. The diner was a place where gossip thrived, and she'd grown accustomed to hearing the latest news from the townsfolk. As she sat by the window, absent-mindedly stirring her coffee, she overheard a conversation between two of the construction workers who had been involved in the project near the Harris farm. "I heard the kid, Thomas, did it on purpose," one of the men was saying. "Spooked the horse just to see if she'd bolt. Never thought she'd end up in that ditch, though." The other worker snorted. "That Thomas, always causing trouble. But his family's got money, so nobody says a word." "What can you do?" Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She leaned in, pretending to listen to the jukebox, but every fiber of her being was tuned in to the conversation. "They say the Harris place is going to be the next target," the first worker continued. "The company's been eyeing that land for months. It's prime real estate, right on the edge of town. Thomas and his folks want to buy it up cheap, get rid of the Harris family, and develop it for some new project. But first, they had to scare that horse. Don't want anyone to get too comfortable." The words hit Amelia like a thunderclap. Her mind raced, and suddenly everything made sense. The strange way Jasmine had acted after the fall, the lack of real remorse from Thomas and Jared, and the subtle but growing tension in Willow Creek. This wasn't just a random act of cruelty. It was part of a larger plan, a deliberate effort to intimidate the Harris family and force them off their land. Jasmine's fall had been a message. Amelia immediately excused herself from the diner, her thoughts swirling. She needed to act quickly. She knew that the Harris family, who had always been proud and protective of their farm, would never willingly sell their land. The community respected them, and the farm had been a cornerstone of Willow Creek for generations. If what the workers were saying was true, the Harris family was about to be caught in a web of lies and deceit that stretched far beyond the actions of two reckless young men. Amelia made her way to the town's historical archive, a small room at the local library that housed decades of documents. She had a hunch about where to look. If Thomas and Jared's family had been involved in land deals and shady business, there would be traces of it: deeds, contracts, anything that could tie them to the construction project. Her fingers trembled slightly as she sifted through the dusty files. As she pulled out a thick folder labeled Willow Creek Land Development from the 1980s, her eyes widened. The name on the cover page was familiar: the Preston Group. She remembered hearing that name mentioned in hushed tones around town. The Preston family had been one of the wealthiest and most influential families in Willow Creek, but their rise to power had always been a little murky. Their connection to the construction company became immediately clear. The Preston Group had been purchasing land in Willow Creek for years, slowly acquiring prime properties under the guise of development projects. At first, it seemed like a simple attempt to modernize the town, but the deeper Amelia dug, the more she uncovered. There were records of underhanded deals, pressure tactics, land buyouts at below-market prices, and even accusations of intimidation from longtime landowners who had been forced to sell. And then, Amelia found it: an unsigned contract from several months earlier that outlined plans to buy the Harris farm. It wasn't a formal offer yet, but the language was unmistakable. If the Harris family could be made to feel unsafe or uncomfortable, they might be persuaded to sell. Amelia's pulse quickened. It all fit together. The Preston Group wanted the Harris property, and they had used Thomas and Jared as pawns in a twisted game of intimidation. By targeting Jasmine, they had hoped to shake the Harris family to their core, hoping they would feel threatened enough to leave. The wreckage of Jasmine's fall had been merely the first move in a larger, more ruthless scheme. Amelia stood in the dimly lit library, the weight of the truth pressing heavily on her shoulders. She knew what she had to do, but the road ahead would not be easy. The Preston family was powerful, and their reach extended far beyond the construction project. They would do anything to protect their interests. Still, Amelia was resolute. She couldn't let them get away with this. The Harris family deserved to keep their land, and Jasmine deserved more than just survival. She deserved justice. But Amelia also knew that the fight was just beginning, and it would take every ounce of courage and determination to bring the truth to light. As she left the library, a sense of clarity filled her. The next steps would be difficult, but she had a plan. She would gather more evidence, speak to the right people, and expose the corrupt dealings that had taken root in Willow Creek. And, most importantly, she would protect Jasmine and the Harris family from whatever came next. The days that followed Amelia's discovery felt like a storm quietly gathering strength. As she moved through the quiet streets of Willow Creek, the truth she had unearthed weighed heavily on her. The quiet hum of the town, the same hum that had comforted her for years, now seemed filled with a dark undercurrent. The unsettling realization that the Preston family had orchestrated Jasmine's fall to manipulate the Harris family into selling their land was hard to process. What started as a simple land deal had morphed into something much darker, and the more she uncovered, the more dangerous it became. Amelia knew she had to be careful. She couldn't reveal her findings too soon, not with the threat of the Preston group looming over her. The family's influence stretched far and wide. Not only did they own much of the land around Willow Creek, but they were also politically powerful. The mayor, who had been a trusted ally of the Preston family for years, could easily shut down any attempt to expose their corruption. The town was vulnerable, its loyalty to the Preston family tested only by a handful of brave souls. Amelia had always admired that quiet, small-town strength, but she now understood just how fragile it was. She spent her nights combing through more documents, matching names to deeds, cross-referencing dates and details. It wasn't just the Harris land the Preston group wanted. It was the whole area surrounding it. The land was ripe for development, and their plans included luxury condos, retail spaces, and a golf course. The Harris property, with its untouched meadows and old-growth trees, was the perfect centerpiece. It would give the entire project an air of authenticity, the image of preserving nature while profiting from it. It was all too perfect, too manipulative. But Amelia knew she couldn't take this on alone. The threat to the Harris family was more than just financial. It was personal. The Preston group had already shown that they would stop at nothing, even endangering a beloved animal like Jasmine to get what they wanted. She made a plan to meet with the Harris family that night. They needed to understand the depth of the conspiracy and prepare themselves for what was to come. That evening, under the fading light of a late summer sunset, Amelia drove to the Harris farm. As she approached, she saw the familiar outline of the barn against the amber sky, a picture of peace and serenity. But tonight, the farm felt different, as though the weight of the secret Amelia carried had settled over the land like a heavy fog. The Harris family was already gathered on the porch, waiting for her. Mr. and Mrs. Harris, both in their mid-50s, had weathered their fair share of hardships, but they had always managed to keep their heads high. Their faces, though filled with concern, were a mixture of hope and resolve. Their bond with Jasmine was unmistakable. She wasn't just a horse to them. She was family. Amelia, Mr. Harris greeted her, offering a firm handshake. "How's Jasmine today?" "She's healing," Amelia said softly, looking over at the barn where the horse was resting. "But I need to talk to you both about something serious." They sat on the porch, the evening air warm but filled with tension. Amelia hesitated for a moment, her thoughts swirling. How could she explain the depth of the corruption that had infected the town without causing more panic? How could she protect the people she cared about? "The accident with Jasmine," she began, choosing her words carefully, "wasn't just an accident." Mrs. Harris's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Amelia took a deep breath. Jasmine wasn't just spooked by reckless driving. She was targeted. Mr. Harris's eyes narrowed. Targeted? By whom? Amelia looked them both in the eye, steeling herself for the truth that would shatter their perception of the peaceful life they had built in Willow Creek. "The Preston group," she said, her voice steady but heavy. "Thomas and Jared, they're not just troublemakers. They're part of a much larger plan. Their family has been trying to buy your farm for months. They want to turn the land into a development project, luxury condos, retail spaces, a golf course. And they were willing to do anything to force you to sell." The words landed like a blow to the chest. Mrs. Harris's face went pale, and Mr. Harris clenched his fists, his jaw tight with anger. "Jasmine," Mrs. Harris whispered, her voice breaking. "They did this to her?" Amelia nodded. It wasn't just about scaring her. It was about sending a message. If they could frighten your family into leaving, they'd get what they wanted. But it wasn't just an isolated incident. This has been going on for months. The entire town is at risk. The room fell silent. Mr. Harris stood up, pacing, the weight of the situation settling over him. "I don't believe it," he muttered under his breath. "Not the Prestons. Not here." "I wish I was wrong," Amelia said. "But the evidence is there. I've seen the contracts, the deals they've made. They've been acquiring land around Willow Creek for years. They want your farm as the crown jewel in their project. If they're willing to hurt an animal, they'll stop at nothing to get what they want." Mrs. Harris wiped a tear from her cheek. "How do we fight this? They're too powerful." Amelia shook her head. "We fight with the truth. The Preston Group may have money, but we have the people of this town. The community respects you. They know you, and they won't stand for this." Mr. Harris looked out at the horizon, his eyes hardening with resolve. "We won't let them take our farm. We won't let them destroy this town." Amelia smiled, a small flicker of hope in her heart. "I'm going to expose them. I've already gathered enough evidence. It's just a matter of putting the pieces together and showing everyone what's really going on." But as she spoke, a gnawing feeling tugged at her insides. She knew that exposing the Preston Group wasn't going to be easy. The mayor, a loyal ally of the Prestons, would surely do everything in his power to shut her down. The town would have to take a stand, and many would be too afraid of the repercussions. But Amelia was determined. She had already risked so much to uncover the truth, and there was no turning back now. The following week, Amelia worked tirelessly to prepare for the confrontation. She met with local journalists, gathering support from the press. She made contact with the sheriff's office, hoping to enlist their help in investigating the Preston Group's business dealings. She reached out to a lawyer who had experience dealing with corporate corruption and land disputes, asking for his advice. But as the days passed, the pressure mounted. There were subtle threats, strange men following her car, phone calls in the middle of the night with heavy breathing on the other end, and the sense that she was being watched at every turn. The Preston Group was not a family that took kindly to opposition. One evening, as Amelia was reviewing her notes, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Amelia," a voice said on the other end, low and menacing, "stop digging. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Leave this alone, or you'll regret it." Her pulse quickened, but she remained calm. "I'm not afraid of you." There was a short laugh, cold and harsh. "You should be. You think you're some kind of hero, but you're nothing more than a pawn in a game you don't understand. Stay out of our way." The line went dead. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. She knew she was playing a dangerous game, but she had no intention of backing down. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. The Harris family and the town of Willow Creek depended on it. But as she looked out at the town, she realized that the battle ahead would not be easy. The forces they were up against were ruthless, and the price of truth could be steep. The storm was coming, and Amelia was ready to face it. Amelia woke up early the next morning, the sun casting its first light over Willow Creek, painting the town in a golden hue. But the serenity she had always found in the dawn now felt hollow. The weight of the coming battle was beginning to settle in. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The Preston Group, with their money, influence, and connections, would not back down easily. They had the resources to silence her and anyone who stood with her. But Amelia had a responsibility. It wasn't just about Jasmine anymore. It wasn't just about the Harris family. It was about the future of Willow Creek itself. The small town that had been her home, a place of peace and simplicity, was at risk of being swallowed whole by corporate greed and corruption. She dressed quickly, her mind already racing through the steps she needed to take. There was no time to waste. She had to prepare the town, unite them against the looming threat, and ensure that they understood what was at stake. She couldn't do this alone. Amelia's first stop was the local diner, the heart of the town's social life. If there was one place where information and rumors flowed like water, it was there. The booth by the window, where the old-timers met to discuss everything from crop yields to local gossip, would be the perfect starting point. She arrived just as the early morning crowd began to filter in. Most of the regulars greeted her with a nod or a smile, but Amelia could sense the undercurrent of anxiety. The air was thick with the kind of quiet tension that only comes when something big is about to break. She slid into the booth and motioned for the waitress to bring her a coffee. As she sipped, she kept her eyes on the door, watching for familiar faces. Then, the person she was waiting for walked in, Linda Carson, a longtime friend and a local journalist. Linda had always been skeptical of the Preston Group's dealings, but had never had the courage to investigate them too deeply. The threats were too real, the risks too high. Amelia motioned for her to join. Linda hesitated for a moment before sliding into the booth, her eyes scanning the diner before settling on Amelia's face. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Linda said softly, her voice tinged with concern. "I need your help," Amelia replied, her tone serious. She lowered her voice further. "I found proof. It's worse than I thought. The Prestons aren't just trying to push the Harris family out. They're orchestrating a takeover of the whole town. They've been acquiring land quietly for months. And Jasmine, they were willing to hurt her to make sure the Harris family would sell." Linda's eyes widened. "What? They did this to a horse?" "Yes," Amelia said, her voice steady but filled with anger. "They used the accident as a warning. But it wasn't just about scaring the Harris family. It was about getting their hands on this land. They're planning a huge development project, and your story could be the key to stopping it." Linda leaned back in her seat, her fingers drumming nervously on the table. "I've heard rumors. A few whispers from the construction workers. But they're just rumors, Amelia. I'd need more to go public with this. You know how the Prestons work. They'll bury anything that threatens them. They have the mayor, the sheriff, everyone in their pocket." "I know," Amelia said, "but I have proof. I've found contracts, records. They've been buying land under the table for months. They're not just after the Harris farm. They want all of it, the whole region. And if we don't stop them now, it's over. Willow Creek will be lost." Linda's eyes narrowed as she thought, weighing the consequences. "You're right. But going public with this won't be easy. The mayor's already shown where his loyalties lie. He's not going to stand by and let us ruin his business partnership with the Prestons." "I'm not asking for an easy fight," Amelia replied firmly. "I'm asking for the truth. We need to expose them for what they are before it's too late. The town needs to know. The Harris family is the first target, but if they win, we're all next." Linda hesitated for a moment longer, then nodded. "I'll help. But you have to promise me something, Amelia. Promise me that we'll go about this carefully. We can't just go charging in without a plan. We need allies. We need to get the right people on our side." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Amelia and Linda began gathering more evidence, reaching out to former employees of the Preston Group who might be willing to speak out. Linda used her connections to gather stories from the local press, while Amelia continued to dig deeper into the historical records, making sure they had every angle covered. But the more they uncovered, the more dangerous things became. Amelia could feel the watchful eyes of the Preston family on her every move. Someone had been tailing her, and the unsettling phone calls kept coming. There was no longer any doubt that they knew she was onto them. Still, Amelia didn't back down. She couldn't afford to. The people of Willow Creek had the right to know what was happening to their town, and if she didn't act, no one would. Her next step was a risky one. She needed to go public, but not in a way that could immediately give the Prestons ammunition to discredit her. She needed a plan, a strategy that would rally the town before the story broke in the press. Amelia reached out to some of the more influential members of the town. She called James Ferguson, the local farmer whose land bordered the Harris property. James had lived in Willow Creek all his life and was known for his fair-mindedness. He was also a staunch advocate for preserving the town's rural character. If she could convince him to join the cause, others might follow. The conversation was tense, but James was quickly convinced. He had always been wary of the Preston Group, but had been reluctant to speak out against them. Now, with Amelia's evidence, he saw the full extent of the danger. "If they take over the Harris farm," James said, his voice low, "they'll have control of the entire valley. We can't let them do this." He agreed to speak at the upcoming town hall meeting and lend his voice to the fight. It was a small victory, but one that would give Amelia and Linda the leverage they needed to start pushing back. The next few days were a blur of meetings and preparations. Amelia and Linda worked tirelessly to organize the town's response. A rally was planned for the upcoming town hall, where they would unveil the truth to the public. James Ferguson would speak first, and then Amelia would present the evidence she had gathered. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The Prestons were powerful, but they had underestimated the resolve of the people of Willow Creek. The rally wasn't just about saving the Harris family. It was about preserving everything the town had stood for. As the day of the town hall approached, the tension in Willow Creek reached a fever pitch. Amelia could feel the weight of what was to come. The town was ready for a fight, but they had no idea what they were up against. Would they stand together, or would they crumble under the pressure of the Preston Group's power? Only time would tell. The day of the revelation arrived. Amelia, with the help of the local authorities, managed to bring the truth to light. The evidence was irrefutable. Thomas and Jared's family had orchestrated the entire scheme to steal the Harris land, using Jasmine's fall as a means of intimidation. But the biggest twist came when the town's mayor, who had been complicit in the cover-up, was arrested alongside the construction company's owners. It was a shock to everyone, especially those who had trusted him for years. In the aftermath of the scandal, the town began to rebuild. Jasmine, once again a free spirit, roamed the meadows with her head held high. The Harris family's land was saved, and their reputation restored. And as for Amelia, she found peace knowing that her efforts had made a difference, not just for Jasmine, but for the entire town. Years passed, but the legacy of what happened in Willow Creek remained. Jasmine's story became a symbol of the strength that lies within all creatures, human and animal alike. And though the scars of the past would never fade, they served as a reminder of how far the town had come. As the seasons changed once more, Jasmine stood atop the hill that overlooked the town, her mane blowing gently in the wind. The sun set in the distance, painting the sky with vibrant colors. She had been through so much, yet here she was, standing tall, a testament to resilience. The town of Willow Creek would never forget her story.